You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael from Arizona, and with me always are my good friends,
Jay from the hills of Texas.
And Mike is not with us tonight.
No, he's not with us tonight.
Actually, we're doing a special, 4th of July deal. He's out partying, I think. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, you'll understand why. But it's just Jay and I tonight. But before we get started, let's hear a word from our sponsors.
3D Aeroventures, adding fun to the RC hobby, one layer at a time.
Feeling weak and powerless? Sounds to me like you need A-Power batteries. When someone needs the best, they always choose the A-Team. A-Power batteries. Get on the web and get yours today.
And welcome back to the Park Flyer Podcast, the special 4th of July issue. For all those guys out there, I hope you had a wonderful 4th of July. And
boom, bang, 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 boom.
Exactly. We did. And if you're watching, once again, I mentioned before the break there, but if you're watching on our YouTube channel, make sure you go over there and subscribe. You'll see that we have a big surprise.
Yes, you're sitting next to me.
I am sitting next to you. So I am on my way to Dallas. I have a trip, and I decided since it was the holiday, a friend of ours from college, his name is Tom. He decided to come in on the 4th of July, and I haven't seen Tom in about a year. So on my way to Dallas, I was like, "Hey, I'll slip in there." And, just kind of catch the two of them. So I kind of surprised everybody and dropped in.
That he did. Hey, I'm at the airport. Pick me up.
They're out running around, and I was like, "Hey, you guys in Austin?" They're like, "Yep." I said, "Good, come get me." So anyway, it's been a great
just call
visit.
me Uber.
Mm-hmm. I almost did. Almost called an Uber.
You did. The two of us came out there and got you.
Oh, that is true. Yeah, that's true. So when I showed up, and it was kind of late in the evening, but then the next day we got a hold of Jim, and we went out to the field and flew.
We did. Had a good time too.
Yeah, it was a good time. So Jim actually brought. I have to apologize. He was happy to see us, but he said we threw him under the bus on our last podcast.
What?
So. We don't mean to throw anybody under the bus. That is not our intent.
Just under the front tires.
Yes. We just want you to have a good time. And
roll over them slowly.
We hope that you're out there having a good time, and we do apologize to anybody that we may have thrown under the bus unintentionally. But we are pretty good sports, and we like to rib each other. So, and Jim was
you mean Fireball sport. Jim?
Fireball Jim.
Yeah, that's his new nickname now, Fireball.
Oh.
Mr. Gasoline.
Oh, yeah.
Fire that. Once again, he said we threw him under the bus, and that was good. All over the gas.
That's true. And he did. And you know what? I think this time he roped us into that because he had us flying gas too this week.
He sure did.
And we'll get to that later. But he actually wound up coming out to the field with a new airplane.
He did.
He had a new E-Flight.
Not just any airplane, an EDF, which is outside his comfort zone.
That's true. But he is flying the Panther, I think. You guys talked about that.
He is. We've flown it a couple of times, and we had a little mishap a couple of weeks ago. But
that's true. And but anyway, he was all excited that I was in town, so I got to maiden the thing.
You did. That you got to christen his plane.
And christen it, I did.
And yes, you did. It was definitely special. Thank goodness Jim is a master at repairs.
Yes. All right. So just to let you guys know, because this was one of those things that we did not intend to happen, but, he brought it in. He was excited to see us both. And, we kind of took a good look at the E-Flight A10. I know it's been out a little while, but it was my first look at because I have the Motion RC A10, the very large one. And he was excited that, oh my gosh, you have the big one. This is the smaller version, and tell me the differences. So we talked a little bit about, what he had read and how to fly it. It's only his second EDF, and we talked about the fact that he's got 2 motors instead of 1, and that it's not that drastic if you lose a motor. I've actually lost one of mine, and the battery kind of went dead because I use 2 batteries one for each motor, and this one only uses a 4,000, I think, right? 4,000 6L.
Yeah.
And so it runs both motors. So even if you lost one, if something the ESC burned up on one or the motor quit, it doesn't really make that big of a deal because it's kind of a centerline thrust. So that being said, we kind of checked all of our control surfaces, and we did find a little variance.
We did. Well, don't forget this had a ASX3 in it, right? So it had a gyro in it, the Spectrum gyro, and not to say we're experts on that particular gyro. So there was a little bit of figuring out this and that, and getting it to work with his radio.
That's true. Because he uses a Futaba,
right? With a not a transmitter, but with one of those modules that he can switch between the different frequencies and stuff.
Right.
So that's kind of cool.
The DSMX module,
but the big thing with that particular gyro is depending on what mode it's in, it makes the control surfaces act differently, and that was throwing us off because he thought he had leveled everything, and then we'd have it in a mode, and therefore all of a sudden the flaps would start moving.
Right. Yeah. There's 2 modes.
Right. Yeah. And we thought there might have been, not enough trim or trimming issue or mixing problem, but it was just the gyro doing what it was supposed to do. And that was the hardest part to kind of figure out.
Yeah.
To make sure
so the ASX3, that he had in there, it wasn't just the ASX3, it's actually the whole receiver. And the receiver that comes in the airplane ready to go, it's a bind and fly. And that particular receiver is got an ASX3 gyro and a safe mode.
Right.
And so the safe mode is basically a recovery. And I did a little bit of background, for the podcast here, but that's really what it's for, is this little recovery thing. If you get into trouble, you should be able to hit the safe mode button, and the airplane should right itself and do all that. But the problem that we were having, control surfaces were moving, and I did not realize that we had it in the safe mode. So it wasn't doing quite what I wanted it to do. But when you rolled the airplane left and right, you picked it up, it would do full deflection. But when I went to go move the sticks, nothing happened.
Right.
So then we flipped it upside down and noticed that the ailerons were totally, full deflection. And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird because I have no control. And we finally figured out on his radio that we could turn it on and turn it off. He had it attached to a switch.
Yeah.
Which I think is not quite the correct thing, and we'll probably correct that.
Luckily, when you flipped it, well, we'll talk about that just in a second, but I know that it definitely needs to be on a momentary button because if you flip it on a switch and forget about it, next thing you're flying into the next county.
It won't.
The gyro does what it does, and
the safe mode.
Particular safe mode will keep you flying straight and level until the battery runs out.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it does a really good job. But so anyway, the only thing I think on this airplane that we had to readjust was the ailerons. I think one of the ailerons was just slightly off, and
but it was weirding us out because all of a sudden the flaps started working as ailerons. Remember that? Yeah,
but that was because the safe mode
was on. Right. That's what I'm saying. Right. It was just one of those things like
that was the control surfaces removed.
Is it supposed to be doing that? Is
that did confuse
in there
us for a little bit,
and then but it figured out and it's doing just what it was supposed to do.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it was. So anyway, we kind of talked to Jim. I asked if he wanted to buddy box it, but he was like, "No, you just take it up and trim it out, and then we'll do that next time around." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Well, the one thing I noticed on this one is that the Motion has trailing link gear, and they're real soft.
Yes.
So you can take it off on grass. These guys are flying at a grass field. Mm-hmm. The grass here, you just cut the grass.
Just cut it.
But it still's a little clumpy, I think, because it's just Texas grass.
Weeds, you mean?
Texas grass. Weeds, whatever it is. Whatever you want to call it. So it's grass. And then, I didn't think I would need very much. And it was the maiden flight. So, of course, I didn't want to just pull the thing off the ground right away and get it, stall it or anything. So I'm trying to be real careful, and I added power, and the thing started rolling pretty good, but the nose bounced once, twice, and the third time it bounced, it caught something.
and that front nose did a wheelie.
Yeah, it came up, and when I went to go rotate, the nose dropped back down and caught something and just sheared the nose gear right off.
Right off. Bink.
And it happened really quick. It wasn't anything that I was doing. I didn't want to haul back on the stick and just pull that thing right in the air. I figured it would, because your L39 does that too. It kind of bounces, and then it'll get airborne. And I figured, it bounced again, and then that's when the nose gear came off. But I had plenty of speed, so I just went ahead and lifted off.
Yeah, I wasn't sure because Jim had read that the nose wheel, can rip out of the body. That's kind of what I thought it did.
That's what I thought. It was
a Monday or Friday plane, and the guy didn't put enough glue in there.
Right.
And I was like, well, it looks like a clean break. But luckily for you, when it broke off, it was on the upswing of the hop.
Yes.
So it bounced into the air and actually got airborne.
Correct.
So, it kind of worked out.
Yeah, it did ding the nose a little bit because the gun, it caught the gun, and I think it tore.
It did wrench it down.
It tore the nose because the gun was facing down. But regardless, we got it back in the air, and everybody ran over there and collected the gear. And in the meantime, I was trimming it all out. But I was surprised it didn't take a whole lot of trim. And about half throttle, this thing was scooting along. I was really impressed. Having flown mine, I was really impressed with this one. I took off with half flaps. It's still moving out. So I trimmed it all out, and we had it on a high rate. He had high rates and low rates, and the high rates were really high. Like they were almost full deflection, which in my eyes was a little too aggressive for that particular airplane. And then he had 50% of that. So I flew it on high rates for a second or two just to kind of trim it out. And then I moved over to the low rates. And once I got to the low rates, it smoothed out. It felt so much, more refined. It rolled at a controlled rate, more scale, I guess, is what I was looking for. And so anyway, I flew it around for good 3 minutes, I guess.
3 or 4 minutes, yeah.
At half throttle, even.
You weren't overstressing it. It was just, but that was like you said, the thing that was really amazing at half throttle. It was really buzzing around, a great sound to it when it flew by. Yeah. And even when you came down and we measured, I think it was still 3.8 or it was higher.
Yep.
It was almost 3.82.
I think.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty amazing for as long as you had it up. Because I think you flew a little bit longer than 3 minutes.
I may have, because I trimmed it out, and then we were worried about coming into land, and I was trying to get it slowed down.
And it was one of those things we didn't have the timer set up in Jim's radio.
No, we didn't.
And Jim had put it on his phone, but just between the little mix up in the beginning with the hop and the excitement of all that, and then by the time Jim started his
I don't know if he started. I don't know if he started it or if he started late. But either
so
one,
it wasn't exactly 3 minutes or at that point that he had his phone. So
all I remember him saying is the time doesn't count. I was like, oh, great.
Yeah.
So,
but as it turned out, it wasn't like it was at 3.2 and you had one more pass and that was it. So you had plenty of battery left in that. It wasn't even straining. That was pretty cool.
So I did notice it was, it is a little speedy little airplane. Jim said I think it's advertised at well over 100 miles an hour, or at least up to that, which was pretty surprising. And it seems to, downwind, it was really moving. So, but it turns and burns just like the best of them. I did a couple aerobatic maneuvers and then went ahead and dropped the gear and flaps to see how slow I could get it. It's got really good slow flight characteristics, and I kind of brought it in and just touched down. And when it touched down, it kind of
the only thing you didn't do was you didn't take it up and stall it to see what the stall was
I
like.
did. Yeah,
did you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was real quick. Because I'm familiar with mine, so I just wanted to see how slow I could get it, and it just kind of wallered.
Well, that's right. I keep forgetting it has the gyro in it.
Yeah, so it just kind of it didn't even really walk too much. It just kind of went ring ring, and then it just kind of started mushing. But I did notice that it's a floater. I mean, that one floated even with the full flaps, and I originally thought the full flaps were too aggressive.
Oh yeah,
because they hung all the way like barn doors. Like full deflection. But when I came into land, I was glad because, it got me slow enough and it got the nose up.
Flaps
I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, and that's if you remember the first time I came around, I did that low pass. It's because I really didn't feel like I was slow enough and I was only at half flaps then. So
Okay,
I was
that's
like,
right,
you know
that's
what?
right.
Because I did a real low pass, and then
Yep.
I was like, okay, screw that, and I went around because I just was not slow enough. It really still felt like it had a lot of momentum, and I didn't want to skip off the ground or come in and hit. I wanted it to plant and be firm on the ground because I was worried about, cartwheeling it or tearing it
Right.
up if the nose dropped. Well, so the second I got back up, and that's when I put the full flaps down and I slowed it way down, and I just pulled the power all the way off and pitched the nose up, and that's when it kind of just started sinking, and then I added power and then just kind of came around. So the second time I came for that second approach and touched down. It rolled about 5 feet, and the nose came to a stop, and the gun, like I said, was hanging at about a 45 degrees, so we know that it had torn the top part of when the nose gear came off. It had done some damage
Right.
to the
And
nose.
you made sure that was nice. It was nice and sheared off.
Yeah,
after
it was
that.
clean.
It was a clean break after that.
And then the only other thing that happened, he was talking about wanting me to bring it in on its belly,
Right, the gear up,
but there was too much stuff hanging
hanging
off
off the
of it.
bottom. He didn't have any of the ordnance. It's just there's
No, just that
other
that
pieces and
pod
parts
and
that are kind of hanging off.
And the wheels kind of do hang out. I didn't want to ruin those, and I knew it would scratch up the bottom, so I figured I'd sacrifice a little bit of the nose for
Yeah.
that because the
It
nose
wasn't
is
bad
pretty-
at all. I think I have a picture of it that I'll put in here
Yeah.
of the aftermath. But
So
really,
unfortunately, he didn't get to fly it.
yeah, that did kind of suck, right? So he
I
was
know,
all
right? He was
pretty excited to get his hands on the sticks, and we
and
had
I
this
was
little
excited
mishap.
for him because I was like, "Hey, this is great."
Now, a little bit of a precursor of the story, I guess. So Jim, like I said, Jim had done a lot of research on the good, the bad, the ugly of the airplane. So he was fully prepared when it came to this particular plane as the parts that might need to be modified, parts that were going to break, parts that other people were having problems with. So one of the things that he said to me was, before we started, was that the landing gear on this particular plane was a little weak, or the nose wheel had problems.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, when the pin had broken, or the nose wheel had broken, I ran up and I looked at it, and I looked inside. And normally on landing gear like that, they have like a little pin that go to the strut, and they go with an Allen screw or something.
Yeah,
like
it's a
that
shear
to hold
pin.
the shear pin. And so it had sheared, but when I looked at it, it looked like it was plastic, like hard plastic.
It did look plastic.
And I looked at that and I was like, what the heck? Why would they put a plastic pin
Right.
in this plane? Because,
Right.
I could have sworn I read that this thing you fly off of grass fields.
Yes.
So later on, just before we started the podcast, I had a chance to talk to Jim. And now the good news is we're going to go flying with him not tomorrow, the day after. But he has repaired the plane, of course, and he unfortunately had to manufacture his own fix for it.
Yep. You sure
So
did.
we haven't seen it yet, and we'll probably report more on it later. But basically, he had to, I don't know, mill or make, or by hook or by crook or whatever he did, but he fashioned a new shear pin.
Right.
And he said that the one that was in there was metal, and it did shear or break. But he thinks that the replacement will be much better. Now, the part that I didn't like about the gear, it's just straight, the strut inside the strut type that are on most older style
Yeah, it's a straight strut. It's not trailing link.
EDFs for flying off of pavement fields.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of surprised about that. I thought it would be softer, a little softer in there.
Right.
Or have a little bit more travel or something. It might not look scale, but I figured you'd have a little bit more travel to go on grass fields or stuff. And so it was really stiff. I was quite amazed at how stiff it was.
Yeah, but if you go back to the Motion one that I have, it has trailing link gear for pavement, and it has straight gear for grass.
Yeah, but my L39 has the trailing link gear, and
It does not have. It does have trailing gear, but it's for grass or pavement. It doesn't have specific gear for grass. The A10 does.
Oh.
And the reason I think that it's a little stiffer is because they know that grass has a little bit more of a bounce to it, and with those heavier springs. I suspect that if you had all the ordnance on that airplane and the big battery and it was ready to go, that those springs would probably work better on a nice grass runway, a real tight grass runway, as opposed to this one.
off road.
And if you've got all that in there and you come in and you kind of boom hit the ground like that, we realized early on when we got our A10s from Motion that if they hit the pavement, they were going to skip. They were going to bounce. It was going to come up. You either had to add power or hold it, and you're either going to cartwheel it or the nose was going to drop. You're going to do something. But if you changed it to those stiff ones, then it came down and just boom, it just stayed, because it was a lot, stiffer spring, and you didn't get this bounciness like you did with the trailing link, because that's more like a pogo stick, right? So, but yeah, I was impressed. He said, "Yep, it was a very easy fix." He said it took him just a few minutes, and unfortunately, he didn't get to fly it then. But yeah, you're right. Hopefully, we'll get to go out with him here. While I'm still kind of hanging on before I have to make it my way to Dallas again, and we can report back. So,
yeah.
But he did. I will say that he did get to fly the Panther, and that was fun.
Yeah, that worked out well.
Yeah,
and you guys spent a lot of time, giving some stick time for Jim. Not last week's, but 2 weeks ago, I talked about Jim, trusting his plane, and so all you guys did was not touch and goes, but setting up for landings, just landings, and you just spent your time landing the plane and talking about it. And I could definitely see Jim's confidence level come up over the course of time as you were kind of explaining things to him, and that's all you did. You didn't let him do any acrobatics, no real fly. It was up into the pattern, down, downwind, turn base. Okay, this is what you need to be doing. You need to be this high. If you're this high, make sure you're doing this. Oh, you got, you have the field. Yeah, right. It definitely, I could see the progression for him.
Yeah.
And once again, it's that I keep talking about calibration of the eye. And I could see the wheels turning, and I could see Jim. He's just, once again, I think another good session with you, or one, another 2-3 batteries to that particular plane.
Right.
I think he's going to get it.
Yeah, I think he actually already got it. I think he just needs a little bit more stick time, because he understood everything we were talking about. Although he did learn a new term.
What's that?
I was surprised. Well, all through the aviation world, since I fly, real airplanes for a living, then we talk about the thrust levers, which when I'm talking about a radio, it's the throttle lever, right?
Right.
So you either have full throttle or idle.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, idle.
And so I told him while we were flying, I said idle thrust, and he didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
And that was my fault, because, I didn't really think in my head when I'm training someone or I'm talking to someone and I say idle, I just think that the throttle is at idle. But when you're not flying EDFs on a regular basis, or turbines, because remember I was flying turbines just last week, and we were talking about, thrust to idle. Well, that's something that's very common in the turbine world and in the real aircraft world, where in the RC world, it may not be that way.
Right.
People talk about power, or they talk about the throttle forward, throttle back, no throttle, forward throttle. And I just wasn't thinking about it. So he made a really good observation when he said, I don't understand what that means. What is idle thrust? And I thought to myself, that was good, right? I mean, I was really happy with that, because he explained to me, rather than not saying anything and just guessing whatever that meant. He verbalized, hey, I don't know what that means. And I was able to go, oh, okay. So when we came into land, I told him, I said, if you're sitting in an airplane, this is forward thrust. It goes max thrust or takeoff thrust. Then it goes to climb thrust. And then it goes to idle thrust. And then in a real airplane, you can go to reverse thrust. Some RC airplanes, I think Big Mike has one that can do that too. Yeah. But so it was interesting for me. And it just kind of gave me another, one of those things in my head where, before you go out and do something, with a student, make sure that they understand,
right.
All
get that terminology down.
Terminology is just so if I say something, they understand what I'm requiring them to do. So when he understood it after we landed, and I kind of walked through what the throttle settings were, he's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. We went around and did it again. And this time, I mean, I think he was surprised himself, but he just came in and he just greased it on. And I think it surprised him. I think he thought I was doing it, but I wasn't. But he did a really good job. And I think he got a good taste of, what the gyro can do, because I told him on one of those, hey, pull the thrust to idle or go close the throttle. And then when he came around, I'd never told him to add throttle. He just kept pulling back. And the airplane just kind of started coming down, and it just kind of plopped onto the ground. And he looks at me and he goes, I was at full back, stick. I had full elevator in there. And I go, yeah, fantastic. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. And I think it surprised him how it just came in and just kind of flattened itself.
Right.
It didn't do
and we talked about that, last podcast as well. And that's just trusting your plane the equipment, the gyro, trusting the gyro.
Yeah. And the gyro's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So, I mean, he just everything that the gyro's doing, if it's rocking left, and there was a little bit of wind, so the airplane's kind of rocked left and right. And he felt like he was all over the sticks, but in reality, I don't think he was. I mean, I was watching him, and he didn't really, I was just holding the trainer switch. He did get disoriented once, but it's just because he got so far out.
Even though that plane's brightly colored, it does get dark. It does get dark in certain situations, or with the way the clouds are or whatever.
Well, he got into the tree line.
Oh, and then he got below the tree, he was flying right at the tree lines, and that.
Well, I kept trying to get him to come down, and he got turned in, and the airplane rolled the other direction. I think he put a control input where he thought the airplane was going, and it went the other way. But he I let him go as far as he could, and finally he goes, "Yeah, I don't have it. It's not doing what I think it's going to do." And I gave him a couple of seconds more, and I go, "Okay, well, I got it." So I came back around, but I gave it right back to him. I just righted it. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit going back to this A10, because kind of a good segue that the airplane that I was able to write it, this SAFE program that they write into this ASX3 does exactly the same thing.
Sure does.
So a lot of times I'm buddy boxing someone, and I'm either holding the trainer switch in this case, or it's I've got it set up on my radio when I do it that all I have to do is touch the sticks and the airplane's mine.
Right.
So it works out better for me, and that way I can put my sticks in the neutral position, half throttle here and neutral stick. And then I basically, can just sit there with my fingers on it. And then if he gets into trouble, or he or she, whoever I'm flying with, all I have to do is either add throttle or take it away or move the stick. And
and then you have control. Right.
So this SAFE mode, as I was messing with it, because I got the airplane trimmed, and then I came down and I thought, okay, well, let me try, if I'm going to hand the airplane, hand it over to Jim, let me try the SAFE mode. So I flipped the switch, because he has it on a switch. So I flipped the switch. The airplane kind of, didn't really do anything, but then it was flying kind of on an upwind, right? It was just coming by us going up the runway. And then I tried to turn.
Yeah.
And as I was trying to turn, I was turning to the left to kind of make this pattern work, and it wasn't turning, and it wasn't turning, and it didn't turn, and it didn't turn. And then I kind of was like, oh man, it's not doing what I wanted to do. It's just flying straight and level. And I'm thinking, and I was like, okay, this isn't a good thing at all. How do I, and then in my head, I was like, how do I get this off? Because I looked down when I flipped the switch, but now I'm watching the airplane go by, and I'm like reaching with my fingers trying to find which switch it's on.
Right.
And finally found it, and flicked it off, and then got the airplane. I did a real hard turn, brought it back around. So I tried it again on the downwind. I flipped it on, and then I think Jay was talking, and then all of a sudden I was like, yeah, this is no good at all. I don't like this mode. I don't like it. And Jay's like, what? What is it? And I go, this SAFE mode. I said, it doesn't do what I thought it was going to do, right? I thought it was, and in my head, I guess I wasn't really thinking SAFE as recovery. I was thinking SAFE as in the first mode, which is a trainer mode, which limits the banking.
Right, you won't be able to go over 30 or 45 degrees.
Right, that's originally what I was thinking. I did not realize that he had programmed it into the recovery mode, and as a result, we were doing something that wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Exactly.
What I thought it was.
And then I think you took it up, you had it climbing, and then at the top of the climb, you kind of rolled it a little bit, and then you hit the switch, and then it righted itself.
It did. It righted
and then you went,
itself.
oh,
yes. And then it made more sense.
It made more sense. And that works great. And then you were like, oh, I have to flick the switch back off. And now I have control. Right. So it doesn't need to be on a switch per se, but a momentary switch, like the trainer momentary switch.
Right. And in Jim's case, his trainer switch was being utilized.
Right.
Because we're training, right? So he set it up to be like, oh, I want Mike to hold it, and then I'll fly it, and you can hold the trainer switch. Well, that would work. So I think you and I talked about it on the way home. We decided that if you're flying by yourself with this mode, it may be okay to put it on the trainer switch.
Absolutely.
But if you're buddy boxing, you don't really need SAFE mode.
Right, because you already have the SAFE mode.
Because I'm standing right next to you. Right. And so, that way, if I let go of it, it's going to right itself because I'm going to do the writing.
Right.
But it was kind of fun because once I realized what this would do, I really rang it. I mean, I went up there and just I started rolling it and I pushed it forward to tumble, and then I hit the switch and bam, it righted itself and then just started flying normal. Now, I think if you were headed at the ground at full speed, I don't think it would do anything but right the wings. I don't think it would actually pull out of a dive.
Well, we'll just have to try that next time we go out.
Yeah, maybe so. We'll have to give it a try. But anyway, I was super excited about it, and it was very impressive to me how quickly it recovered. But yes, I think definitely in Jim's case, it should be, if he's flying it by himself, that safe mode should be,
on the trainer switch.
Right. So, and then I think literally we flew the Nitro plane. He broke that out, and we got to go fly that one, and we had fun. That was a longer than a 3-minute flight. So and my arms got tired.
way longer.
But it was pretty fun. And then I guess right before we left, he said, "Hey guys, I got a surprise for you." And he handed us the new, I don't know if it's really new, right? But it's the newer.
It's pretty new.
The TX16S. It's the new Taranis, right? And
it's a Taranis style radio.
TX16S, and it's by Radio Master. He was pretty excited. He said he talked his wife into it. And if you're watching our YouTube, there's a picture of it right there. And he's handed it to Jay and said, "Hey, go talk about this." And I think you had all of about an hour on the sticks over here trying to play with it.
Well, I was just trying to program it and make sure that the calibration was all done, make sure it had the right sound packs in it, the firmware was up to date, just some basic stuff with the radio. So, it's pretty neat radio because the screen it's a touch screen. So I have a Taranis radio, but there's no touch screen or anything like that in there. So that's neat. You can load pictures of your own models into it. So that's kind of cool. It's Bluetooth. It's got, it's
kind of reminds me of the new NX series from Spectrum.
Right.
Yeah.
I haven't really cracked all of what this radio does.
Right.
I'm just barely playing with it. Jim had given me, old quadcopter that we had that I'm going to try to program on this as well. I haven't played with one of the things we talked about with the A10 is to see what telemetry we can get off of that.
That's right.
Off of that particular receiver, and how does it display on this particular radio? So that part I don't know, but so we may try. I may try it with one of my planes and see what kind of information we can, get off of that onto here.
Sure.
So it's pretty neat. The price is nice.
It's not super expensive compared to others.
No, not at all. And just the part that gets me is just all that you get for this radio. Once again, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
For the cost of my 6-channel radio, here you're getting a 16-channel radio.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
With all the bells and whistles. So,
and it's got voice, so that was good news.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I just love the voice. I can't live without it.
Yeah, well, there you go. Once you get used to it, it's hard to go back.
It is hard to go back. Very hard.
Especially for us, and we have so many models. You just, God love Jim. He takes the time to write everything down, put it in the model. When I got that Panther, I opened up the thing, put the battery in there, and there was a little card in there, and it said, "This is my settings." And he's like, "Oh, that's for me." And then he went back and flipped his radio to match all that stuff. And I thought, well, that's dedication, because I'm too lazy. I don't think I could do it.
Yeah, and his old Futaba is not that it's a bad radio or nothing. No. It has everything this radio has in the sense, but for me, I get my model out, and I'm like, pretty much I keep everything the same. Flaps are going to be on the same switch, that type of thing. But, do I have a mix on this particular model?
Right.
I think I put a mix on this, and then I just flip all the switches. Right. And then when she starts talking to me, I go, oh yeah, it's on the switch.
Yeah.
I do have this mix, and the mix does this. So, I guess you want to call that laziness or whatever.
It's not laziness. It's just technology. It's kind of.
But it's so convenient to be able to go, when we have, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 models.
Exactly.
You tend to forget what you put on one model, and all I have to do is just flick all the switches, and I can figure out within a quick 30 seconds what everything does or did. And, I'm off to the races, as opposed to like I said, Jim brought out a plane and he's sitting there flipping switches, and did that thing move? And I don't have my glasses, and I'm like, I think it did.
Yeah. Was that supposed to move, or was that coming?
Does it usually move like a millimeter or two, or does it move,
a lot or
a little? He's like, what?
That's funny.
So, yeah.
Well, we're excited to play with it some more. We didn't get to play with it as much before this podcast, but Jay's got it for a little bit longer, and I think by the next podcast or two, he will have been able to kind of mess around with it.
We will, yeah.
Well, in our remaining time, I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about this new mandate from the FAA for this trust test.
Yeah.
And
I think they should have picked a different name. I'm with the government. Trust me.
Yeah,
trust.
Right. And okay, so first of all, I got to say that Jay and I are normally 99% of the time on the same page, and we are on this one as well. I know he's over here nodding, but what I mean by that is that rules that go into place are normally for our safety, and if the AMA is suggesting that we take the test, both of us understand the importance of FAA or of the AMA and their safety programs, and we do know that this is a mandate from the FAA. So, we suggest that you take the test just to be legal. Now, having said all that, we obviously, one of us flips a coin and plays the devil's advocate, so that we're both on the same page from a safety standpoint. It's always to hear, you always want to hear the other side of it. So we have a tendency to kind of, one of us will take the other side. So having said all that, I have taken the test. I understand all the questions, and I've done a little research. However, Jay and I have had this discussion while I've been sitting here, for the 4th of July, and we've talked about, kind of the pros and cons of how we feel this is being utilized. So first of all, the trust stands for the Recreational User Safety Test. That's really what it stands for.
That's a terrible acronym.
Well, it's just I don't know. It's just the initials of all those. But anyway, and there are 17 places that you can actually take this test. Everywhere from the FAA website to the AMA website to I think a couple of universities are offering it. A couple other things, a couple other places. But if you go to the FAA website for the trust test, or you just Google FAA trust test, it'll give you a list of all those. It is mandated as of June 2021, so we're already a month into it. I mean, we're coming up on the second month. And then you basically take the test, and it will give you a printable certificate, and then you are supposed to carry that certificate with you at all times with your registered aircraft, just on the off chance that you get inspected by some law enforcement, or if there is a question. I think this is supposed to act as a, hey, look, I understand what I'm doing. Here's my piece of paper, kind of like get out of jail free card. If you're accused of flying in an area where, maybe not someone feels like a law enforcement guy, I can't imagine him knowing every place.
There's already a problem there, because what law enforcement's going to be like, yeah, you're flying that too high in the sky, and I think that's against FAA rules. And you're going to be like, what are you, the FAA police?
Yeah, I don't know necessarily if that's the case as much as someone saying, hey, you can't fly over here. This is not a designated, because we've seen that, right? You've sent me videos of guys that are in the park,
sure,
and the police show up and say, hey, you can't fly in this park.
Yeah, and the guy obviously will go, yeah, I'm flying well below the minimums. Right. I'm flying whatever, and the cop's like, well, I don't think you are, and it doesn't matter. They can't arrest you for flying at that high. If it went to court, they're going to go, well, okay, it's 400 feet. So, officer, let's say I was a guy's lawyer, I'd say, well, officer, what device did you use to measure the height of the thing? Can you tell me what other regulations that the FAA are putting in place, or are in place at this time at this altitude at 1,000 feet for this outside airports? And of course, the cop's going to go, I don't know. Have you got any training with the FAA? No. Well, then what were you doing trying to enforce something that you have no jurisdiction over?
Well, and that's kind of the big question, right? Is we don't know whether the law enforcement has jurisdiction over, this portion or not. They're being told, and we see videos on YouTube of law enforcement, local police officers confiscating drones, or, talking to individuals who are flying in certain places and saying that you can't fly here. And they're quoting laws, but they're federally mandated laws.
Exactly.
And they're local officers who may or may not have, I mean, it's one of those things, I guess, as a local law enforcement can say, hey, you're breaking FAR such and such, 107, blah, 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 blah. And he may know that. Okay, well, what is the recourse for that? If I am truly breaking it, then they would have to solicit the FAA to come out and review what they claim they saw versus what I claim I saw, and it would have to go to a federal court.
Right.
From what I understand. Now, if you're listening and you think that's different, please comment in our YouTube section below, or send us an email, or give us a call. Let us know.
Sure.
But in my, and I actually have a couple of guys in my field that are lawyers that probably would be able to answer that. But and maybe I'll ask them next time I see them. But for my initial reaction, it's that, okay, well, it's a federal law. They can arrest you for breaking federal law, but the federales basically have to prosecute you for it. So I'm not really sure how that's going to work. But there are some other things other than the law enforcement side of it. There's some other things that we have talked about that may be a little worrisome.
Oh, that's right, because we're talking about the intrusion of the stuff that's going to go on the drones that they haven't done the technology for, right? Yeah,
so like in the aircraft world, we call it ADS-B, and It's basically an out broadcasting system. And if you're a podcast listener, I'd really like to hear your feedback on this, because when ADS-B came out, and if you're a pilot, you would know this. So like if you're a pilot and you fly RC, you should understand. But the FAA came out basically initially with ADS-B and said, hey, this is our this is our next generation. Next generation shows everybody. It's all for safety. You can see them. They can see you. You transmit data between each other. And we're going to mandate this as of the 31st of December 2019. So the January 1st, 2020, this has to be installed in your airplane or your airplane's grounded. You cannot fly it anymore. So everybody rushed around. They offered some rebates, blah, 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 blah. I won't bore you with the details, but everybody put it in there because the FAA convinced everyone that this would not be punitive. They would not use it for punitive action against pilots because this was a safety-based operation, not a punitive. So they weren't installing it to see if you were flying at the correct altitude and say, oh, you know what? You weren't flying at the correct altitude, so therefore you are going to get violated or you'll get fined or whatever the case may be. What they didn't tell us initially was that this information is instantly made public. So everybody in the public can see my aircraft, what my aircraft's doing, where it's flying, what my altitude, what my airspeed, all the details, lat longs, you name it. Okay. Well, here comes a year later. So we're already, a year and a half into this. And all of a sudden, if you're on the aircraft world, you may have seen some of this stuff, but now we're getting not me, but some of the pilots that I
stacked this thick.
No, I didn't get one. I'm just getting, I see, because I'm on the web board, a web board or two, and I know other pilots. And so I get something that says, hey, what do you think of this? And I read it, and it's basically from the U.S. Forest Service.
Or the Park Service, National Park Service.
And the National Park Service says, hey, dear pilot of this airplane, because it has your tail number, we noticed that you took off out of XYZ and you flew at blah, blah, blah altitude over this particular park on this particular day at this particular time. We know that the FAA requires you to be at a such and such altitude. You violated the airspace. Either cease and desist, or you will be prosecuted under the fullness of the law, and the Attorney General will get involved. Well, this pilot's all freaking out about it because he's like, what the heck? It's a chart. It's on the chart that it's a public, park. It's in our world as a pilot, you need to be it suggests that you fly at least 2,000 feet above the national park. Well, this particular guy was a little lower than that. He wasn't flying like at 100 feet in the park. He was flying like at 1,900 instead of 2,000. Well, that could be an error instrument, right?
Could be.
Because
he could have been flying, trying to look out for the seagulls or look out for some
Well,
birds.
I'm just saying that,
he could have been,
he could have thought he was at 2,000 feet, but he could have been lower because of the pressure, the heat, the altitude, whatever the case.
But it could have been.
There's a lot of aerodynamics I could go into.
There's numerous things for him to lose 1,000 feet.
And it's suggested. He didn't lose 1,000. It was only several hundred.
Okay.
Right. So from 2,000 to like 1,700 or 1,900.
Okay. But I'm just saying he could have been busy doing something that was a little bit more important.
Oh, that's correct. He could have varied off his altitude or whatever. He's VFR. He's allowed to do that.
Yeah.
But the point that I'm making is that the FAA said, oh, it's not punitive for us.
I know. And now all of a sudden, another federal agency is using the information, which is now public, to bring up a question on this guy's ability to operate the aircraft. And the reason I was making the suggestions that I was is because, once again, you have the National Park Service, which aren't pilots. No, nothing.
Well, they have people that fly.
I know they do. I'm not saying, but what I'm saying, their business isn't to be a pilot.
No.
Or with aviation, right? And they're
Right.
grabbing this information,
Right.
and now they're saying, "Hey, you went an inch below, 2,000 feet.
Right.
Oh my gosh,
Right.
we're going to report you to the FAA." Well, once again, I might have radioed back to the FAA to say, "Hey, I got the situation. I have to lose some altitude, or I have this problem. I can't tell what my altitude is, or whatever the mishap may be."
Right.
And all of a sudden, you have this other agency that's trying to burn you for something that they know nothing about.
Well,
that's my problem.
And that's just one instance.
Yeah.
Because another instance that we have, and you'll have to excuse us because this isn't RC related per se, but it's kind of driving the point home for what we're looking at right now.
I know.
in this technology that's coming. The second one that came across, my email that kind of concerned me was a state, and the state basically sent a letter to a pilot that said, "Hey, we're turning you in for basically tax evasion." And the reason they said that is because we know that on July 1st through July 30th, you took off from this local airport, did a local flight, returned to the local airport, and you did it for 30 days in a row. Now, according to our state charter, if your aircraft sits in our state for more than 30 days, you must register it as an aircraft that's based in this state because you owe registration tax on it, right? Registration of a state registration for your aircraft is a tax.
Right.
So you pay it. It says it right on the thing because I know I pay it every year, and it just says this is your registration tax. So what they're doing is coming after the pilot because they were able to track him every single time he made a flight inside the state from a local airport to a local airport. He said, "I'm only visiting." They said, "Doesn't matter. The rule is if your aircraft's been here for 30 days, it's now a resident of that state." So he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Wow.
Now, having said all that, putting all that aside, you can kind of see Jay's point on this, because remember, I'm pro, right? It doesn't sound like it at the moment, but this has been a discussion back and forth pretty much for the whole time I showed up. We talked about it on the way from the airport while we were flying, on the way home from flying, because I had just, I'd taken my test and this has kind of been on my mind. And so in the short time we have left, it's just kind of reiterating that this trust test and this new technology that comes in, for me, even though I've taken it and registered my planes and done everything that I'm supposed to be doing so that I'm not the big example at the end of this, right? That the FAA comes after me. But for those others and for you bringing up a lot of good points, it doesn't necessarily mean the FAA could be the one, but other people, right? So now local law enforcement can basically designate an area like a city park. Okay, well, this city park is not, you can't fly over the city park, right? Well, now they can actually track that. And even though the FAA says, no, this is for safety so that everybody can see, well, another agency.
Right. And they're going to be sending out tickets because somebody in their Cessna was flying at, flying over at 8,000 feet. And they were like, hey, you flew over our park.
Right. Well, not in the Cessna, but I'm relating it back to the RC.
But you know what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm being facetious. Or,
right.
Whatever.
But now you have a RC airplane, which is basically a hobby.
Right.
And I have a designated airplane, but somebody sitting one block over can pull it up, look at the information and go, wait a second, this guy went 410 feet. And so he can report it, or the water district who owns that property can report, hey, you know what? He flew over our property by XYZ. And the reason this is concerning when Jay and I were talking about it is because they gave examples on this trust website of actually it's not examples. It's the what I tell you it was the app.
Right. That app. Yes.
So the app, the DroneFly app, right? Drone Zone app. The Drone Zone app shows latitude and longitude of your particular phone right now.
Right.
So it says, oh, if this is a fly zone, I can fly here. You download it to your phone and you go, oh, I wonder if I can fly here. Oh, I can.
Right.
It knows your phone's there.
Right.
And that technology eventually is going to transfer into your RC airplane. And now they can see a latitude, longitude of your airplane at all times. That, I think, is questionable.
Look, as much as I've been in the government, worked for the government, I just don't trust the government. And it's just one of those things. You give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And they take something that's supposed to be good. Hey, planes won't be smacking into each other while they're flying with this technology. And then another agency goes, hey, we could start getting revenue by sending out fines for this information we're getting from the FAA for pilots flying around, or like that classic example you just gave, the guy flying, came into the state visit. He's staying for a month with his parents. He's flying around local airports. Next thing you know, he's getting a tax bill, but he lives 2,000 miles away.
Or he may have a house here during the summertime.
But you know what I'm saying. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying now you're having all these agencies going, hey, there's another revenue stream. There's another way we can get people for instead of jaywalking. Now we can get them if they're flying their drones and they happen to fly over the city park, the post office, the whatever they designate in their town that they have some height restriction on.
Or just a flyable zone.
Flyable zone, right.
You can't fly over public or federal buildings. So that includes, by the way, the parking lot.
Yeah.
So if you came down the sidewalk and you crossed over their driveway, that's considered the parking lot. Right. They could say, oh, you flew over a post office.
Right.
And that's illegal.
Right.
So now that's the other part too, is that we haven't really discussed that, and the FAA hasn't come out with anything as far as I know. And if somebody knows this, please let me know so I can look it up. But as far as my research and, as far as I've gotten into that research, I haven't seen any fine schedule or any punitive side if you are caught. I do know it's coming, but I don't know whether you lose your, I don't really have a license to fly RC because it's a hobby, but I do have registration. Are they going to confiscate my airplane? Are they going to give me a fine?
No, they won't, because I don't see the fines, once again, aren't going to be coming from the FAA. They're going to be coming from these other agencies.
Yeah, but the other agencies can't really. I mean, why would they fine me if it's an FAA rule?
I can't really answer that particular thing. I just know that they're going to have somebody scheming up a way that they can get $10, $20 fine from you for doing what you did. Even though if you actually probably took it to court, it would get thrown out. But
well, I can tell you just from the flying in the real world or around the world, the FAA only controls the U.S. airspace.
I understand that, but
so if you did something elsewhere around the world, that particular agency would have to go to the FAA and say, "Hey, we want to prosecute this guy for breaking our rule," and the FAA would look at it and say, "Hey, it's close enough to our rule that we can understand that." So the FAA would come after you for breaking the rule over there.
Yeah.
So the same would hold true in my eyes to that agency who would say, look, that guy, we have a no-fly zone. The guy flew over us. They would have to petition the FAA to do something against the guy. Now, what's the FAA stance on that? Oh, well, I'm not the one coming after you, right?
Right.
I said that I would be no punitive damages.
And they're
not.
It's
that guy.
It's that guy.
That guy.
That's
but because it's my airspace, I'm the one that's going to levy the fine.
Well, once again, the FAA.
Otherwise, I got to tell that guy to just take a hike.
Well, once again, you probably could tell that guy to take a hike, but how many? I'm just saying, like
your brother, I hate you.
I'm just thinking, like certain traffic laws or speed traps.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bazillion examples out there where they're sending out. I know the cameras.
Oh yeah, speed cameras.
Yeah, the speed cameras are notorious for this, where they're taking your picture, saying that, hey, your car on this date was going 55 miles an hour in a 35 mile an hour zone, and you show up in court and go, that wasn't me in the car.
Well, they can't do anything about
They can't
that.
do anything, even if it was your wife or whoever it was. Well, do you know who that is?
Nope.
Well, I'm not going to answer that question. You know?
As a matter of fact, I don't know who that person is for at least the last 28 years.
But my point is, once again, but a lot of people won't go to court. They'll just pay the fine.
They'll pay the fine.
So just imagine if now these agencies figure out that they can start sending recreational hobbyists, and it starts to be profitable, it's just another revenue stream for them to send you a cease and desist letter, or, hey, we noticed on this day we got this information from the FAA, and we may have to report this to the FAA, and you may incur other federal rules unless you go ahead and pay us $25 for,
Yeah, I can see that.
Once again, if it gets to court, it's probably going to get thrown out, but most people are going to be like, oh, I'm just going to pay the $25 and not go through the hassle of getting this on my record, what record you're going to get it on. It's just another hassle from the man. That's all I see coming from this. No good can come from this.
Okay. Well, having said all that, remember, this is a podcast. It's our personal opinions. We're not, talking on behalf of the FAA or the AMA. And I know that they just had a podcast that came out that told you all about the trust and how, they have to support it.
No,
and we are supportive as well, because if it's a safety related, we support the safety related. And I know that, it's a mandate. So like I said,
I'm not against the FAA. I just see other agencies, like you just said, other agencies going, whoa, hey, maybe we can make money doing this. Hey, maybe this,
you never know. So I don't know.
I just I hope that doesn't happen, but I can see it happening just because of the cynicism in me, I guess.
Well, that's good. Well, we'll see what happens. The good news is that you're welcome to comment back to us. Jump on our YouTube channel at the Park Flyer Podcast, and or go on our Facebook page, actually, at the Park Flyer Podcast Listeners Group. Join if you haven't already, and post your comments. We'd love to hear them. Like I said, this is just our discussion. We totally understand that the AMA is requesting all of us do it, and as AMA members, taking our tests. So register your airplanes, do everything you're supposed to be doing, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't have an opinion on how things are going. But let's do the right thing. So I don't want to fall back into that trap where we get done and then somebody goes, wow, you guys were way against that, and you'll never, evidently, if they don't do it, we don't want to do it either. But we follow the rules, and sometimes we don't like them. So, or we have an opinion.
No, we don't like them. I'm not a rule guy.
Jay's not a rule guy. But,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm a little bit different because I play, in that whole rule game, and it's familiar to me from, standpoint of working. So, Jay, on the other hand, is just a true hobbyist. He's like, I'm out. So, well, unfortunately, our hour is up. It has been great to be here in Texas. I'm looking forward. Actually flew in, did a bunch of stuff, and we're kind of doing a podcast real quick, and then we're going to go out again tomorrow, I think, while I'm still here, and hopefully fly or at least hook up with Jim and the rest of those guys. So, anyway, well, I'm excited.
I am too, especially, with the 24 hours or so I have with you. I'm going to do as much as we can. Whether we're here or we're off doing something else, because our other buddy Tom's still here. So,
yeah, that's true. He is here.
Yeah, so
I think I was surprised. That was a great surprise for both. He was like, hey, because we haven't seen each other in a while either. So it was good for us to get together. And unfortunately, our wives are all in separate places. So it's, we get
they get a vacation today. So
yeah, they did.
So
they
got
one
quick,
too.
So.
And I'm off somewhere overseas. So we'll be back in 2 weeks. From Michael here in Texas.
Jay from the hills of Texas.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you, everybody.
Let's
Bye.
fly.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.